Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today, we've got an early impression of a fragrance that's been, uh, you know, giving me the stink eye every time I look at my collection. It's been begging me to wear it, and today I finally did. I've been wanting to wait until the weather cooled down a little bit. It's early September here in Texas, which, unless we get all the way to Halloween at the end of October, it's not going to get cool. So I figured, what the hell? I'll just wear it, and I'm really enjoying it. Been wearing it all day. And it's called Andy Towers Sundowner. Now, this was sent to me by one of my perfume god people. You know who you are. Thank you very much. I have so many of these beautiful samples to test out thanks to you guys, and I'm very grateful. And this is a house that I really like. I think Andy Tower is an example, a shining example of someone that started as just an independent perfumer doing what he loved and turned it into an entire business. We'll talk about some of his other fragrances later on because they do come into the review. This fragrance is a 2021 release. I think it's still his most recent release. I don't think he's had anything else come out since then. It's classified as a spicy sweet fragrance, and let me give you the journey, okay? Because I've been really enjoying wearing this fragrance today. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure wearing this. So instantly from the first spray, two things that you're gonna get, or you can tell. Number one is that you're gonna get this tobacco with cacao, okay? And that tobacco cacao combination smells like it's mixed with Immortelle. Now, there's no Immortelle listed as a note. There are things like tobacco, cacao, cinnamon, orange zest, rose absolute, cypriol, patchouli, sandalwood, tonka, ambergris, and vanilla. A lot of that comes later. In the beginning, it focuses on the tobacco and the cacao. And the second thing that you can tell is that this is a very high quality scent. So Andy Tower uses amazing materials. He's a perfumer based in Switzerland. If you're not familiar with his brand, we'll talk about some of the other fragrances that he has made in my collection later on because they do kind of come into play. And so the cacao is evident from first spray, but what's real interesting about this is it almost wears on your skin like a thin wafer of cacao. Okay, so don't think about like a thick truffle. Think about like a thin wafer. And that thin wafer mixes with the tobacco absolute to give the fragrance the initial blast, the hit that you're initially hit with on Sundowner. And if you've ever seen the bottle, you know, it's blue with golden red hues and yellow, and there's kind of different quadrants looking like a sunset and sunflowers all over the bottle. It's a perfect representation of the fragrance. This is a fantastic fall fragrance. But there's no Immortelle note listed, but I get this Immortelle feel. If I was guessing notes, I would guess Immortelle. Because it has that dry, that dry resinous. It doesn't smell curry-like, that's the thing. And some Immortelle fragrances can go the curry route. Immortelle is known as the curry plant. This one doesn't go the curry route. It sticks with the dry, resinous, tobacco. The reason why I say that there is Immortelle here and not that it's the tobacco giving off that dry vibe, because someone could easily come and say, oh, that's just the tobacco, is because to my nose, especially in the first half an hour of the fragrance, the tobacco seems very damp and it almost seems moist, if that makes sense. The tobacco to my nose seems very moist. And tobacco is one of my favorite notes in perfumery. I love wearing tobacco fragrances in the fall and winter. I just recently wore tobacco oud, and I have a decant of that, and that's completely full bottle worthy. Sadly discontinued, by the way, but I'll talk about some of the other tobacco fragrances, some of them that I just reached behind me and grabbed. I didn't put much thought into it, but I did grab some tobacco fragrances so we can talk about the note as well. But that's the reason why I say it feels like there's a slight hit of Immortelle in the opening, because the tobacco doesn't feel like it's what's giving it that dry category, because the tobacco feels moist to my nose. That's just what what it smells like to me on my skin. So that bone dry, crinkly aspect feels like it's coming from somewhere else, is the point of me saying the tobacco feels moist and damp, and that somewhere else in the opening feels like Immortelle. Now, there's another note we're going to talk about in the dry down, which comes into play. This fragrance is very interesting because it goes through multiple transitions, at least on my skin, and I love fragrances that do that. We'll talk about some of those transitions here in a little bit. So, you have the tobacco, you have the cacao, you have that dry Immortelle, crinkly Immortelle, you know, like you're picking up a dry leaf that's been on the ground, and when you crinkle it, it just, you know, smashes into 1,000 pieces and kind of drifts to the ground. That level of dryness. And then, but the tobacco feels damp. That's the contrast in the opening that's beautiful. And then, 30 to 45 minutes into the fragrance, you will start to get this honey note that comes to the forefront. And it's a beautiful honey note. And if you know anything about me, you know honey is one of my favorite notes in perfumery. So we're talking tobacco, one of my favorites, honey, one of my favorites. And that honey note, it's a beautiful honey too, by the way. It's not overdone. It's perfectly well balanced. I'm a sucker for honey notes. And then, along with that honey, you begin to get this cinnamon. And the cinnamon reminds me, it doesn't smell like the cinnamon from early 90s fragrances. Like if you know stuff like this, Balenciaga Pour Homme, the cinnamon in this is completely different, to my nose. The cinnamon in the early 90s fragrances were done differently. Here, the cinnamon will feel the way, this is the picture I want you to imagine in your head. Imagine that it's sunset, and the weather has started to cool down, but it's not cold yet. So maybe, you know, if you're standing outside with your family, maybe one of them has a jacket on or a sweater, one of them doesn't, because, you know, they don't get cold. One person says they don't get cold, one person is freezing. It's that level of temperature outside. And you have your spiced apple cider. Think of the cinnamon in the spiced apple cider, not the apple cider itself, but the cinnamon. Some people put even more cinnamon in it. Or you could put like that nutmeg, cinnamon inside of eggnog or something like that. That's the mental picture of the way the cinnamon feels like in this fragrance once it begins to heat up on your skin. And that's the journey basically within the first hour. That's the opening salvo, and it's beautiful. It's very well done, very high quality. You can tell that the ingredients are top notch. You can tell that the concept is well thought out. It's not an original concept necessarily, but it's very well done. You know, the ingredients are, they speak for themselves when you smell this. And then what ends up happening is it's at that stage, at about the hour mark, say 45 minutes to an hour, when you really will start to notice a couple notes start to come to the forefront, okay? Vanilla is number one. And this is where the fragrance starts teetering on the edge for me, because I love everything so far. But once that vanilla starts coming in, I start to kind of cringe a little bit, because I'm worried that the vanilla is going to turn into something very sweet. Like, for example, the way that the sweetness was done in this tobacco fragrance, which is Herod, begins to worry me, because I don't like sweet fragrances, okay? And nowadays, that's all that's issued is sweet fragrances, because that's what sells, I guess. I don't know. But personally, I don't like it. I found once you've been in the game for a long time, sweet fragrances begin to come off as childish to me, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a time and a place for that. But most of the time, I don't want to wear sweet fragrances. The only time I wear stuff like this is if I'm going to a place where I want other people to respond positively to my fragrance. Normally, I don't give a shit whether you like it or not. But if I'm going somewhere where I want people to respond positively, that's where you can kind of whip out the sweet fragrances. And so once the vanilla starts to come in at about the 1 hour mark, that's where the fate of this fragrance basically hangs in the balance. Because that's where I was kind of like really cringing. Too much, it would be too sweet. And it's a serious issue nowadays. I mean, in my opinion, anyways, it is. And basically what Andy Tower did is he walked right up to that line. I mean, if this is too sweet, the vanilla is like coming and he goes right up to it, okay? He doesn't cross the too sweet threshold, but damn it, he gets as close as he possibly could, right? And even a little bit more would be too much at about the 1 hour mark. And that's where I'm like, you know what? This fragrance is not for me, because it really does get right up to that sweet point. And, you know, it gets right up there and I'm like, it's really pushing it. It's still very well balanced, still very well done, but it gets to that sweet point and I'm like, I don't know. But this fragrance goes through transitions. Again, that's what's beautiful about this fragrance. So that's the first transition. We go from the, you know, thin layer of cacao with tobacco, transitions to that vanilla, and it walks right up to that line. And the other thing that you will start to notice at the 1 hour mark, and what makes the sweetness a little bit more bearable once you get to that 1 to 2, we'll call it the 1 to 2 hour mark, okay, is ambergris. Now, it's Andy Tower style ambergris, okay? So if you are familiar with his work, just to give you an example, there is what's known as a tower odd. So there's a Guerlain uses in their fragrances, and there's a tower odd. It's like a DNA, a signature grouping of notes, which a perfumer puts in their fragrances, all the different fragrances they create, that gives them like a signature DNA, if you will. The tower odd became very evident in L'air du désert marocain. Okay, so it's here. This is a fantastic spicy amber fragrance, by the way. Reference amber fragrance. I still don't think it's better than Ambre Sultan. I think Ambre Sultan is the, you know, gold standard as far as ambers go. Some people love one and hate the other. I don't. I like them both, but I just think Ambre Sultan is a better fragrance, even though I know people like Luca Turin say this is a once-in-a-generation fragrance, that kind of thing. For me, I prefer Ambre Sultan, but I can still appreciate L'air du désert marocain. He did an extrait version called Accord du désert. These are his new bottles, by the way, which the sprayers on these are shite. I don't know if he's fixed it, but the sprayers are absolutely terrible. My favorite Andy Tower creation is Lone Star Memories. I'm a little bit of a contrarian in that everyone else loves L'air du désert marocain. I love Lone Star Memories. It's my favorite by far. What they all share in common is even this, actually. This is his old style bottle, Incense Extreme. This is what the old Andy Tower bottles used to look like. Look at this. This actually unscrews and you could just open it up. But, this is such a great incense fragrance. But even this one, all of them, have this Tower Odd DNA. And basically what it is it's his creation of ambergris, whatever that is. You know, I don't know if he uses real ambergris or not. If you held a gun to my head and said pick, I'd probably say no, he doesn't. That his ambergris is a lab creation of some sort. That he's used different notes and accords to give the impression of ambergris. And it smells very unique. You know, I've smelled real ambergris in multiple fragrances. I've talked about some of those, like Ambre Supreme from Les Indemodables. I've talked about Atlantic Ambergris from Arizo Dori. Those use real ambergris. And it's a very distinct smell. You know, it gives off, it's a fixative, but it also gives off a, you know, it gives off like a, an aura to the fragrance. Ambergris fragrances have this aura that other fragrances don't have. And that's why it's so hard to replace. His creation, we'll call it a synthetic creation, but it's done very well. You know, that's one of the tricks of perfumery, is to create something that isn't necessarily there, to give the impression, to make people think you're smelling something when it isn't there. That's where true artistry and perfumery starts to come into this. And he created this DNA, and it's amazing. And so with that vanilla, going back to Sundowner, which I know I've kind of rambled a little bit, but going back to Sundowner, when that vanilla starts to come up and I start to cringe at the 1 hour mark and go, oh no, here we go. It's about to go super sweet. Also, rising right along with it is that ambergris, his ambergris creation. And what it does is it allows the nose to focus on something that is a little more interesting to a seasoned nose. Let's say you're a newbie and you spray this on, you'll focus on the vanilla. The sweet vanilla is what you'll get and you'll like. there's more underneath it. There's layers underneath it. And so once I was like, you know what, this isn't for me, more things started to reveal itself. So you start to get that beautiful ambergris creation that he made, whatever it is, whether it's ambroxan with salty materials or who knows how he did it, but you can smell, if you're familiar with Le du Desert Marocain, Accord du Desert, Lone Star Memories, Incense Extreme, those kind of fragrances, you will smell that DNA. You'll smell that house DNA across multiple fragrances of his. You know, it's like Stephen King writing in a character in multiple books. You can still read, you know, you can still read this book and completely appreciate it for what it is. But if you also read the previous one where the character, you know, was in that same book, you'll get just a little bit more of an appreciation, right? That's how the ambergris in Sundowner is for me. I like it, but I like it even more because I can understand its origins, if you will, if that makes sense, okay? It's really good. It's really, really good. And so, so the thing about the tobacco, let me just talk about tobacco for a bit, because tobacco is a note that I absolutely love. Many times it's done in sweet fashion. Like here's a couple sweet tobacco fragrances. This is Frank Bachlet Tobacco. This is supposed to be a take on Tobacco Vanille, which I have a decant of. I don't have a full bottle. This uses like a plum note, whereas I think Tobacco Vanille uses more of this dried fruits. I like Tobacco Vanille more than this, but this 100 ml bottle I got for like 70 bucks, so it's much cheaper than Tobacco Vanille. I like them both. This is also a sweet tobacco, but very well done for a designer. L'Homme Ideal Extreme. This is the old bottle. They don't look like this anymore. The cap is black and the label, I think, is silver or something. But this is also tobacco with plum and almonds and heliotrope. And probably one of my favorite from the line. I like this one, and I like the EDP, even though the EDP is both of them are sweet. But I think I prefer the Extreme version. And then there is a fragrance from the house of Amr Oud called Oud Tabak. Now, Oud Tabak is also a take on Tobacco Vanille with, if you've ever said to yourself, man, I really wish Tobacco Vanille had some frankincense in it, this is the fragrance you want to smell. It's very similar to Tobacco Vanille, but with oud and frankincense added. The only problem with this fragrance, there's lots of amber woods. And so if you don't like amber woods at all, like if you sniff an amber wood and you go running, that's not for you. And then probably one of my favorite takes on tobacco, because it's not sweet, but it's also not a tobacco fragrance in and of itself. It's not a pure tobacco. There's more going on. But it's Journeyman from the House of Amouage, one of the most beautiful bottles you'll ever see. I love Amouage's presentation, how they can make each one unique with that, you know, liquid gold going down the side. Oh, it's so good. Peppery, neroli with frankincense and tobacco, and a beautiful cypriol, and there's a leather note in the base as well. Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it does have some synthetics too, like there's geraniol and ambroxan and stuff like that in here, but you know, it's not as sweet as some of the other fragrances. And this is their newer creation, which is Boundless. They also came out with Royal Tobacco, which I should have a decant coming soon so I can talk about it for you guys. Boundless is a fragrance that kind of disappointed me a little bit. I expected more, is all. It's a good fragrance. It starts out very spicy, and you know, the blood orange with the cardamom and the LME mixes well with the, you know, there's a freshness of ginger. But I just, the dry down starts to also go ambery woods. Even the perfumer says, when I created Boundless, I wanted to play with the idea of golden woods. That's keyword for amber woods, in case you haven't caught on to the perfumer lingo yet. And, you know, I just expected more. But I have many other tobacco fragrances that I love. I have Creed Tabaron Millésime, which is like a fresh tobacco take. There's so many ways you can play with tobacco, and it's such a masculine note. Um, the one that I really like that's taken me by storm lately is Tabak Vert by the House of Rogue. That's a unsweetened green tobacco, but it's beautifully done. Kind of switches between green and very fine tobacco. But you know, the tobacco's a beautiful masculine note to wear in winter. And you know, the reason I say all that is that there's different ways to play with tobacco. There's different things that you can mix it with. Normally, the safe route is to go sweet, right? This is sweet route. This is sweet route. You know, although this uses osmanthus and some other things, it's still basically the sweet route. That's the common route nowadays. You know, there's also the route of going Middle Eastern style with it, adding that oud. And then my favorite style is when they can find a way to do it, you know, unsweetened. I think this is one of the boss tobacco fragrances no one talks about. Oh God, I love Journeyman. And then Boundless, like I said, it's ambery woods sort of, and that's what let me down. Yeah, so there's many ways to play with tobacco. What makes Sundowner interesting to my nose is once it hits that, we'll call it, you know, the 2 to 4 hour mark, you're really getting more of the, you know, vanilla with the ambergris that starts to come out in Sundowner. And there is a rose absolute note in here, but I don't get very much rose. I think it's there just to give the impression of flowers in the evening time. It's dosed, you know, really with a careful hand, if you will. There's a cypriol note, but I don't get as much cypriol as I do in Journeyman. Again, it's there probably just to add some sort of roundness. But what ends up happening is another transition. So I mentioned, you know, from the 1 hour mark, from the beginning until the 30-minute mark, and then 30 minutes to an hour, there's a little bit of a transition in there. From 1 to 4 hours, there's a transition. And then this fragrance goes through a third transition. And that's the one that it's currently in the late dry down, 4+ hours, that I enjoy the most, okay? And this is where the fragrance did like a turn for me, where, you know, I'm not going to buy it, it's too sweet, to damn, I might actually try to pick up a bottle of this. Because what it does is it brings in a, we'll say 4 hours and onwards is where you really start to smell this. And what it does, it brings in this tonka bean note, okay? Now, tonka and tobacco are, you know, twins. Anytime you see one, odds are you're seeing the other. And the reason is that it's a very easy note to sweeten tobacco. They're very similar in, they're like Batman and Robin, okay? They work in tandem very well with each other. And tonka is a great natural sweetener for tobacco, okay? So that's the reason why normally when you see tobacco, you see tonka with it. And so there's no surprise that there's tonka in the base. What surprises me is the way Andy Tower uses tonka. He doesn't just do the normal sweet Kumarin, you know, the synthetic sweet stuff that you could buy from any of the big flavoring houses. No, it feels like real tonka. And I'll tell you what, I've got some real tonka right here, Arise Ladore, which, by the way, his new collection is out to buy right now. If you're interested in the Indian Attar collection, go check that out. But Russian Adam sent me some ingredients, some actual ingredients. And one of them is tonka. And so I just dipped this in the tonka bean absolute. Is it absolute? I don't know what it is. What's it say? Just tonka bean. Here, it just says tonka bean. So that's the actual tonka bean itself, the ingredient. It's not sweet. It smells hay-like. Very brown feeling. But the trick is unsweet. You know, when you think of tonka, the reason you think of sweet nowadays is your brain has been, you know, coded to think sweet by the big flavoring houses. Tonka's not sweet, not on its own. And here, one of the most realistic tonka notes begins to emerge. Beautiful tonka bean. And like I said, normally it's goopy and sweet, and it doesn't smell like the real ingredient, which I have right here. It's beautiful. And so in the beginning, I said that the tobacco felt very damp and moist, and the brownness came from like that Immortelle. The dryness came from Immortelle. It feels like there's a transition in the fragrance now. The Immortelle is swept away, okay? And what comes to the forefront is this beautiful Tonka Tobacco Absolute combination, okay? And the fragrance does an amazing trick because that Tonka begins to bubble up and it begins to kind of take over some of the fragrance. And it's absolutely stunning. I mean, the Tonka tobacco combo is absolutely stunning. Unsweet, okay? A very fine tobacco, unsweetened in the dry down. And that shocked me. I thought this was going the sweet route, 100%. And you know what? Maybe if you talked to somebody or you watched a review where they put it on and they smelled it and they said that it was sweet, that's why. They didn't wait for the late dry down. If you give this fragrance 4+ hours, beautiful, absolutely stunning. And I very well might consider a bottle. The only thing is 50 ml, $200, whatever at Towers fragrances are now, 230, 250. And I have so many tobaccos to wear. I don't know, I'm torn. But I really do enjoy the late dry down. I think it's a sign of quality, and it's a sign of you know, strength and knowing who you are from Andy's shoes to be able to put this out, because, you know, most people are probably clamoring for the sweet stuff, and this is more of a indie niche fragrance house, which he is. You know, that's what he is. He should be going against the big guys. All the big guys are putting out stuff like this that's ultra sweet and goopy and that kind of stuff. And like I said, there's a place for this. There's a place for this. But this is superior. I mean, as far as tobacco goes, if you can stand that mid, you know, this is like there's a real opening, a real mid, and a real dry down. And if you can stand that mid, the real dry down is absolutely stunning. Oh, it's good. It's really good. From a tobacco lover, it's really good. I can say it's quality juice. So that's kind of the upsides and downsides. The upsides is that it's a unique fragrance to an extent. I mean, the idea is not unique, but the way that he implemented it, he made it his own. You know, the downside, if you don't like the sweetness, that mid might put you off. If you give up on it at the mid, you'll miss the beauty in the late dry down. But even in the mid where, you know, I was kind of like, you know, it's not for me, at least that ambergris kind of comes up and acts as, you know, it almost acts as like a supporting hand for that vanilla, where normally it would be just sweet, gloopy, boring. It's not. So, interesting release. I like it. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Andy's work, period. But I'm a fan of this. And would I buy a bottle? I'm on the fence. It's not a definite no. It's not a definite yes. Maybe if I can get a deal or a partial or something, you know. But, I mean, with this 5 ml decan, I was very generously gifted. I have more than, you know, I've got a couple full wares left here. So, you know, who knows? We'll see. But I'm glad to get to try it. I'm glad to get to do the video. I didn't hear very many people when they talked about this fragrance talk about the late dry down. The Tonka is very realistic. You know, if you go off of Tonka from the designers, you know, if you go off of Tonka and think this is Tonka, it's not. This is not Tonka. This is sweet, gloopy. Ugh, makes me cringe. You know, this is a great representation of Tonka bean in the late dry down. Amazing. Amazing stuff. So cheers, Andy. Thank you for this. It's a good one. You did a good one. And I appreciate everyone watching. Appreciate the feedback, the support, the comments, all that stuff. You know, I know you guys don't have to like and subscribe, but the ones that do are much appreciated. I appreciate every single one of you. And I hope that you guys are getting something out of these videos. And of course, I hope to see you again tomorrow with another one. All right, cheers, guys.